The words just hung there in the air, heavy and sharp like broken glass. "Get out, John. I don't want you here anymore." Sarah's voice was a low growl, barely a whisper, but it sliced right through me. It was 7:15 p.m. on a Tuesday, and my wife of 7 years was kicking me out of my own house. The house I bought, the house I paid for, the house where we had built a life. I stood in the living room, a half-eaten bowl of cold cereal still on the coffee table, watching her. Her face was pale, her jaw set, a stubborn line I knew too well. Her eyes, usually so warm and full of laughter, were like chips of ice. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic bird trapped in a cage. My mind, though, was strangely clear. A single, brutal thought cut through the fog of shock and hurt. "You want me out?" I said, my voice surprisingly calm, almost casual. "Fine." She flinched, probably expecting an argument. Tears, begging. But I didn't beg. Not for this, not anymore. I took a deep breath, the scent of her perfume, of our home, filling my lungs one last time. "You want me out? Then you are out too." Sarah just stared. Her mouth opened, then closed. She looked like she'd been slapped. "What are you talking about?" she finally managed, her voice barely audible. "This is my house, Sarah," I said, pointing a finger, not at her, but around the room, at the walls, the furniture, the very air we breathe. "My name is on the deed. My money paid the mortgage, the taxes, the repairs. You can kick me out, sure, but then you are a trespasser." A flicker of fear, or maybe just confusion, crossed her face. Then it hardened again. "Don't be ridiculous. This is our home. We built this together." "We built a life here, maybe," I conceded. My voice still eerily calm, considering the earthquake inside me. But the foundation, the bricks, the roof over our heads? That's all mine, and if I'm not welcome here, then neither are you in the long run. She scoffed, a short, sharp sound. "You wouldn't dare." "Watch me," I said, and a cold, unfamiliar resolve settled deep in my bones. It felt like a betrayal to myself, a violation of everything we once were. But the sting of her words, the utter dismissal, fueled a fire I didn't know I possessed. "You want me to leave? Fine, but you'll be getting a legal notice from my lawyer by the end of the week. You have 30 days to vacate the premises." The silence that followed was deafening. The only sound was the frantic pounding of my own blood in my ears. Sarah's face went from pale to ashen. Her eyes widened, a raw, naked shock replacing the defiance. She hadn't seen this coming. She thought she had all the power, wielding the relationship like a weapon. But I had a different kind of power. The power of ownership. The cold, hard reality of property law. "You are serious," she whispered. The bravado gone, replaced by a tremor in her voice. "Never been more serious in my life," I replied. And it was true. My heart was breaking, shattering into a million pieces. But there was a strange, grim satisfaction in seeing the tables turn so abruptly. This wasn't about winning, not really. It was about raw, primal survival. If she was going to burn our house down, I wasn't going to let her stand in the ashes alone. I turned, picked up my keys from the hook by the door, grabbed my wallet, and headed for the front door. My hand was shaking as I opened it. I paused, just for a second, my back to her. Part of me, the old me. The John who loved her more than anything, wanted to turn around, to beg her to take it back, to fix this. The new John, the one who had just been thrown out of his own home, knew there was no fixing this. This was war. "Think about it." "Sarah," I said, my voice still low. When you wanted me out, did you think about where I'd go? Did you think about what you were doing to me? I didn't wait for an answer. I stepped out, closing the door softly behind me. The night air was cool, a stark contrast to the burning inferno inside my chest. I stood on the porch, looking back at the house, the porch light illuminating the familiar wreath on the door, the potted plants we had chosen together. It looked exactly the same, but it wasn't, not anymore. It was no longer home, it was just a house. And I, the landlord, had just issued an eviction notice to its sole occupant, my wife. The woman I had promised to spend forever with. The game had changed, and it was going to be ugly. The house, it wasn't just four walls and a roof. It was the backdrop to every significant moment of our life together. I bought it 7 years ago, right after I got that big promotion at the engineering firm. It was a modest 2-story place, a bit of a fixer-upper in a quiet neighborhood. My dream was to make it our dream home. I poured every extra dime and every spare hour into it. Weekends were spent sanding floors, painting walls, fixing leaky faucets. It was my project, my pride. Sarah was just Sarah back then. We were dating, casually, nothing too serious. She was a ray of sunshine, always laughing, always positive. She'd come over on Saturdays, bringing me lukewarm coffees and greasy donuts, sitting on paint cans while I worked, just talking. She wasn't much for manual labor, but she was great at moral support. She'd sketch out ideas for the kitchen backsplash, or pick out paint swatches with an enthusiasm that always made me smile. I remember one afternoon, we were sitting on the bare wooden floor in what would become our living room. The sun was streaming through the uncurtained windows, dusting everything with gold. I had just finished painting the ceiling, my arms aching. Sarah leaned her head on my shoulder. "This is going to be amazing, John," she said softly. Our home. Our home. Our home," I repeated, and it felt right. Even then, before we were even talking about marriage, it felt like she was already part of it. Part of me. That was the moment I realized I wanted her in this house, forever. She moved in a few months later, not long after the biggest renovations were done. It wasn't a grand proposal, just a simple, "Why don't you just bring your stuff over?" She did, slowly, piece by piece, until her bright, colorful personality was woven into every corner of the house. Her vibrant throw pillows on my neutral sofa, her collection of quirky mugs in my minimalist kitchen cabinets, her overflowing bookshelf next to mine. It became ours. At least that's what I thought. We got married a year after that. A small ceremony in the backyard, under the old oak tree I'd trimmed and cared for. The house stood witness, its windows reflecting the happy faces of our friends and family. That first year of marriage was bliss. We hosted dinners, threw parties, spent quiet evenings on the porch swing. We talked about having kids, about getting a dog, about growing old in this very spot. The house wasn't just a place, it was the vessel for our shared future, the container for our dreams. But a house, no matter how sturdy, can't hold up a crumbling foundation. And our foundation slowly, subtly, began to crack. I didn't see it then, not really. I was too busy with work, too focused on providing, on maintaining the comfortable life we had built. I assumed everything was fine because the bills were paid, the house was clean, and we still shared a bed. The cracks started small, a silence where there used to be laughter, a polite agreement instead of a passionate debate, little things. Sarah started spending more time in her art studio, a small converted shed in the backyard that I'd built for her. I spent more time in my home office, buried in spreadsheets, We were both in the same house, but we were in different worlds. Looking back, the house itself became a symbol of our diverging paths. For me, it was security, stability, a tangible asset. For her, I think it was just a place that I owned. Maybe that's where it all began, the subtle difference in how we viewed the very ground we stood on. I saw it as mine, shared with her. She saw it as a cage, perhaps a beautiful one, but still a cage that I held the keys to. I remember one evening about a year ago, we were repainting the guest bedroom. It was a project we'd put off for ages. I was meticulously taping the edges, and she was splashing paint on the walls with broad, energetic strokes. I made a comment about her being messy, and she just snapped. "It's just paint, John. It's not a masterpiece. It's just a room in your house." The words stung. My house, not our house. It was a tiny thing, but it was a brick in the wall that was slowly rising between us. I brushed it off then, told myself she was just tired. But now, looking back, I realize it wasn't just paint. It was everything. The cracks weren't sudden. They were like the hairline fractures in an old pipe, barely visible at first, then slowly widening, letting out a drip here, a leak there, until the whole system was compromised. Our marriage didn't explode. It slowly deflated, sigh by sigh, argument by argument, until there was nothing left but a hollow shell. It started with communication, or the lack thereof. We used to talk about everything, our dreams, our fears, our day. Then it became superficial. "How was your day?" "Fine, what's for dinner?" "Whatever." The easy banter, the knowing glances, they just faded away. I'd try to start a conversation about work, about a movie, and she'd nod, give a monosyllabic answer, and retreat behind a phone or a book. I remember one night, I bought tickets to a concert she loved, a band we'd seen together years ago. I thought it would be a fun surprise, a way to rekindle something. I presented the tickets with a flourish, expecting a smile, a hug. She looked at them, then at me. "Oh, that's nice. But I already made plans to go to a gallery opening with Lisa that night." My heart sank. I tried to hide the disappointment, but it was a physical ache. I told her to go, that it was fine, but it wasn't. It was another missed connection, another piece of us drifting apart. Sex became routine, then rare, then non-existent. It was another sign, a huge red flag waving violently in the wind. But I was so busy, so preoccupied with work, with keeping our life afloat, that I either ignored it or convinced myself it was just a phase. I told myself she was tired, or I was tired, or we were just in a slump. I didn't want to admit that the intimacy, the very core of our connection, was dying. Our arguments changed too. They used to be passionate, loud, but always ended with a hug, a laugh, and a "I love you." Now, they were cold, distant, and analytical. We dissect each other's flaws, not to resolve anything, but to wound. Her favorite weapon was my practicality, my focus on finances and stability. "You are so boring, John. All you care about is money and property. Don't you ever want to just live?" she'd yell. And I'd counter with her perceived recklessness, her lack of foresight. "Someone has to be responsible, Sarah. Someone has to pay the bills and make sure we have a roof over our heads." The house itself became a battleground, silently. She'd leave her art supplies scattered in the living room, and I'd meticulously gather them and put them away. She'd complain about me leaving my dirty coffee cup on the counter, and I'd retort about her leaving clothes on the floor. These were not about the items themselves, but about the unspoken resentment, the passive-aggressive jabs at each other's existence in the shared space. I remember coming home from work one day, exhausted, looking forward to just collapsing on the couch. The house was dark, silent. Sarah wasn't home. I checked her studio. Empty. Her car was gone. I called her. No answer. Texted. No reply. This happened more and more often. She'd be out with friends, or at gallery openings, or just driving around. I'd be home alone in the quiet house, eating a microwave meal, the silence amplifying my growing loneliness. I tried to talk to her about it one evening after a particularly quiet dinner. "Sarah," I began, tentative. "Are you happy?" She looked up from her plate, her fork halfway to her mouth. Her eyes were blank, unreadable. "What kind of question is that, John?" "Of course I am happy." But her voice was flat, devoid of emotion. It was a performance, and a poor one at that. "It just feels like we're drifting apart," I pressed, pushing my luck. "We don't talk like we used to. We don't laugh as much." "Is there something wrong?" She sighed, a long, exasperated sound. "Nothing's wrong, John. Life just happens. People change. We're busy. You are busy. I am busy. It's normal." She stood up, clearing her plate. "I am tired. I am going to bed." And that was the end of that conversation. Looking back, I was naive. I wanted to believe her, wanted to believe that our love was strong enough to weather any storm. I thought if I just kept providing, kept the house perfect, kept our lives stable, that everything would eventually go back to how it was. I missed all the signs, or chose to ignore them. I was so focused on holding on to the physical structure of our lives that I didn't notice the emotional rot eating away at its core. The house, once a symbol of our unity, slowly became a monument to our growing distance. Two strangers living under the same roof, pretending to be a family, until one of us finally snapped. And that snap came not with a bang, but with a weary, defeated sigh and a cold, brutal statement. It wasn't a single catastrophic event that pushed us over the edge, but a culmination of tiny, insignificant details, like grains of sand eventually forming a desert. The day she kicked me out, it felt like the desert had finally swallowed us whole. I remember the morning started like any other. I woke up, got dressed, made coffee. Sarah was already up, sitting at the kitchen island, scrolling on her phone. I poured her a cup the way she liked it, with a splash of almond milk. I placed it in front of her. She didn't look up, just a mumbled thanks. That small, indifferent gesture, so common now, was a dull ache. I went to work, spent the day in meetings, wrestling with spreadsheets, the usual grind. I called her during lunch just to check in. Straight to voicemail, texted her. No reply. It wasn't unusual, but a knot of dread started tightening in my stomach. When I got home, her car was in the driveway. The house was quiet, too quiet. I walked in, called her name. No answer. I found her in the living room, sitting on the sofa, staring blankly at the television, which was playing some reality show I hated. She hadn't changed out of her work clothes. Her hair was a mess. There was a half-empty bottle of wine on the coffee table, and that was when I knew. "Sarah," I said, my voice gentle. "Are you okay?" She turned her head slowly, her eyes unfocused. "Peachy," she slurred, taking a long swig from her glass. "Have you been drinking all day?" I asked, a familiar wave of frustration washing over me. This wasn't the first time. It was her escape, and it always led to the same ugly place. "What's it to you?" she shot back, her voice sharper now, a hint of the anger that was always simmering beneath the surface. "It's to me because I live here, Sarah, and I am tired of coming home to this." I gestured vaguely at the bottle, the unkempt room, the general air of despair that clung to her. "You are tired?" She laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "You think you are tired, John? Try living with you. Try living in this tomb you call a home. That hit me hard. A tomb. My home. My safe haven. My pride reduced to a tomb. This isn't a tomb, I said, my voice rising. This is a home I built, a life I provided for. You provided a prison? She yelled back, finally rising to her feet, swaying slightly. Her eyes, now blazing, were fixed on mine. You control everything. The money, the bills, the house. Me. I can't breathe in here, John. I feel like I'm suffocating. I control nothing, Sarah. I just try to be responsible. I felt the familiar helplessness, the desperate need to make her understand. I do this for us, for our future. There is no us, she screamed, her voice cracking. There is no our future. Not with you. Not in this house. This isn't a home for me, John. It's just a house you own, and I am just another one of your possessions. That word. Possession. It landed like a physical blow. All the love, all the effort, all the years reduced to that. My anger, which had been simmering, suddenly boiled over. You think I treat you like a possession? I bought this house to make you happy. I worked my fingers to the bone for us. What do you do, Sarah? What do you contribute besides complaints and debt? It was a low blow. I knew it the moment the words left my mouth. Her face contorted, not with anger, but with a raw, agonizing pain. For a second I saw it, the hurt in her eyes, and I wanted to take it back, but it was too late. Get out, she whispered, her voice dangerously quiet now, the storm receding, leaving behind a chilling calm. Get out, John. I don't want you here anymore. And that was it. The final spark. The point of no return. I looked at her, standing there, swaying slightly, tears welling in her eyes, not tears of sadness for us, but tears of pure, unadulterated contempt for me. All the love drained out of me in that moment, replaced by a cold, hard emptiness. My initial shock was quickly replaced by a primal sense of injustice. My house, my money, my efforts. And she was kicking me out? Not like this. If she was willing to burn it all down, then she would feel the heat too. I remembered the title deed tucked away in my office safe, the mortgage statements all in my name, the legal realities. It wasn't about revenge, not entirely. It was about standing my ground. If she could walk away from everything we built, then I wouldn't just quietly disappear. I wouldn't be the meek husband who packed a bag and left. I would be the landlord. As I walked out of the house, leaving her alone in the living room, the words, "You have 30 days," echoed in my mind. The shocking hooks, that intro I spoke of, the ones that were going to grab the reader, they were the ones she had just handed to me, wrapped in contempt and a bottle of cheap wine. The shocking hook was her throwing me out, and my immediate, icy response. The story was truly beginning. The next few days were a blur of cold calls and legal talk. I found a lawyer, a no-nonsense woman named Brenda, who specialized in property law and marital dissolution. She listened patiently as I recounted the events, her face impassive. When I told her my intention to evict Sarah, she didn't bat an eye. "It's your property, Mr. Davies, as long as she's not on the lease or deed. And here is no marital agreement specifying otherwise. You have every right." The legalities were simple, cold, and factual. The emotional toll was anything but. I stayed at a cheap motel on the outskirts of town, the kind with thin walls and the faint smell of stale cigarettes. Every night, I stared at the popcorn ceiling, replaying Sarah's words, the image of her face when I walked out. The anger was still there, a burning coal in my chest, but beneath it, a crushing wave of grief. 7 years. gone just like that. The eviction notice was prepared, a formal, stark document with legal jargon. It stated clearly that she was an occupant without a lease, and that I was terminating her tenancy. 30 days to vacate. 30 days to pack up her life, her art, her memories, and leave the house she called home. The house I bought. The house she now wanted me out of. The day I decided to serve it, my hands were shaking. Not from fear, but from a strange mix of dread and grim determination. I knew this would shatter whatever fragile remnants of our relationship might still exist. But what relationship was there to shatter anyway? She had already done that when she kicked me out. I drove back to the house, my own house, feeling like a stranger approaching a fortress. Her car was in the driveway. I took a deep breath, the crisp autumn air doing little to cool the heat in my face. I walked up the familiar path, past the rose bushes we'd planted together, and knocked on the door. My own door. Sarah opened it, and her eyes widened when she saw me. Her face, still pale, was etched with fatigue. She was wearing an old t-shirt and sweatpants, her hair in a messy bun. She looked vulnerable, and for a split second my resolve wavered. Then I remembered her words, "Get out, John," and the coldness returned. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice flat, guarded. I didn't say a word. I just held out the envelope. It was thick, legal-sized. She looked at it, then at my face, a flicker of suspicion in her eyes. Slowly she took it. Her fingers brushed against mine, and a jolt, an old spark, ran through me. I quickly withdrew my hand. She opened the envelope, her brow furrowing as she pulled out the documents. Her eyes scanned the first page, then the second. Her lips moved silently, reading the words "notice to vacate in 30 days. And then, her face. It was a masterpiece of emotions, a raw, unfiltered canvas of shock, disbelief, and a dawning horror. Her eyes, wide and suddenly filled with unshed tears, darted from the paper to my face. Color drained from her cheeks, leaving them as white as the legal paper in her trembling hands. Her jaw dropped open slightly, a silent scream trapped in her throat. "You can't be serious," she whispered, the words barely audible, a pathetic plea. All the defiance from that night was gone, replaced by a desperate vulnerability. "You wouldn't." "I told you I would, Sarah," I said, my voice steady, betraying none of the turmoil inside. "You kicked me out of my house. Now I am kicking you out of my house. It's only fair." A sob escaped her, a ragged, broken sound. "This is cruel, John. This is unbelievably cruel. How could you do this to me?" "How could I do this to you?" I repeated, a bitter laugh escaping my lips. "How could you do this to me? You threw me out onto the street. You destroyed our marriage, our home. You left me with nothing but the clothes on my back." "This isn't nothing," she cried, gesturing wildly at the house. "This is my life, my art, my everything. Where am I supposed to go? What am I supposed to do?" "That's exactly what I asked myself when you told me to leave," I retorted, the anger now fully present, pushing back against the guilt that threatened to overwhelm me. "Funny how suddenly it matters when it's your problem, isn't it?" Her tears flowed freely now, streaking down her pale cheeks. She crumpled the papers slightly in her hand. "You are a monster, John. I can't believe I ever loved you." That stung. That cut deeper than anything else she had said. "And I can't believe I ever trusted you," I said, my voice tight with suppressed emotion. "Goodbye, Sarah. You have 30 days. I turned and walked away, not looking back. The sound of her crying, of her raw, desperate anguish, followed me down the driveway. I got into my car, started the engine and drove off, leaving her standing there, a lone, broken figure on the porch of the house that was no longer ours. The shock had been replaced by devastation, and I knew deep down that a part of me was just as devastated as she was. We had both lost everything. The news, as these things always do, spread like wildfire. First to our closest friends, then to family, then to acquaintances. The story mutated, with each retelling growing fangs and claws, twisting the truth into something unrecognizable. My phone started ringing off the hook. Texts, voicemails, emails. Some were from concerned friends trying to mediate, trying to understand. Others were from outraged family members, mostly Sarah's, accusing me of being heartless, vindictive, a monster. "John, how could you do this to Sarah?" "My sister-in-law, Brenda," Sarah's sister screamed into the phone. "She's distraught. She has nowhere to go." "She kicked me out of my own house, Brenda," I said, my voice tired. I'd had this conversation a dozen times. "I own the house. It's a legal eviction." "Legal doesn't mean right, John," she shrieked. "She's your wife, your wife. You don't just throw your wife out on the street." "She threw me out first," I retorted, the frustration boiling over. Did she ask where I was going to go? Did she care? No, she just said get out. She was upset. People say things when they're upset. Brenda cried, dissolving into sobs. "You are ruining her life." I hung up. There was no reasoning with anyone. Everyone saw only one side of the story. The man evicting his wife. No one saw the years of neglect, the slow decay, the brutal words that led to this. No one cared that I was just as homeless as she would soon be, staying in a lonely motel room, my life scattered. Our mutual friends were the hardest. Some offered sympathy, but with an underlying tone of judgment. "John, are you sure about this? Maybe you two can work it out." "Work what out?" "The scorched earth of our marriage, the trust that was shattered into a million pieces." Others just stopped calling. The silence from them was louder than any accusation. I was suddenly an outcast, the bad guy in everyone's narrative, the man who owned the house but lost his soul. I found myself increasingly isolated. My days were a monotonous cycle of work, followed by returning to the sterile motel room. The nights were long, filled with restless sleep and replays of every argument, every missed sign, every moment that led us here. The house, my house, felt like a distant planet. I knew she was still there, living in it, occupying the space that used to be ours. It was a strange torture, knowing she was there, in my bed in our kitchen, while I was in exile. I started seeing a therapist, not for the eviction, but for the breakup. She helped me unpack the layers of anger, hurt, and betrayal. She pointed out that Sarah's "get out" was probably a cry for help, a desperate act of frustration, but that my reaction was also a response to years of feeling unappreciated and disrespect. It didn't make it hurt less, but it put things into perspective. This wasn't just about a house. It was about two people who had grown apart and then violently collided. The legal process, meanwhile, moved forward like a slow, relentless tide. Brenda, my lawyer, kept me updated. Sarah had apparently consulted her own lawyer, but there was little they could do. The house was legally mine, purchased before the marriage, with a clear paper trail. Unless she could prove some financial contribution to its purchase, or a specific agreement for shared ownership, the eviction would stand. I imagined Sarah in the house, pacing the floors, packing her belongings, or maybe not packing. Maybe just defiantly staying put, daring me to force her out. The thought filled me with a strange mix of sadness and steel. I didn't want to hurt her, not really. But I also couldn't back down. This was a line in the sand. The house, once the symbol of our love and future, was now a battleground. Its walls, once filled with laughter and warmth, were now silent witnesses to our mutual destruction. I remembered all the good times we had there, the Christmases, the birthdays, the quiet evenings curled up on the sofa. And now all of that was tainted by the bitterness, the pain, the cold reality of an eviction notice. I felt like I was watching my own life unfold from a distance, like a movie, where I was both the protagonist and the villain. The legal process was impersonal, logical, but the reality was messy, painful, and deeply personal. I was building walls around myself, just like the walls of that house, to keep the pain out. But the pain, like water, always found a way to seep through the cracks. The days crawled by, each one a step closer to the inevitable. I avoided driving past the house, but sometimes by accident. I'd take a wrong turn, and there it would be, sitting quiet and still, mocking me with its normalcy. It looked exactly the same, but to me it was a ghost. My therapist suggested I go back to the house, if I could bear it, to gather my remaining personal items, and to confront the emotions that were tied to the space. It sounded excruciating, but I knew she was right. I couldn't move forward if I was clinging to the past, or if the past was still holding me hostage. I called Sarah. My lawyer had advised against it, preferring all communication to go through legal channels. But I felt a desperate need to face this head-on, at least one more time. She picked up, her voice wary. "I need to come get my things," I said, my voice flat, a long pause. "When?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "Tomorrow morning," I replied, "around 9. "Fine," she said, and then hung up. No argument, no plea, just resignation. The next morning, I drove up to the house, my heart thumping against my ribs. The lawn was a little overgrown. The flowers in the window boxes looked thirsty. Small details, but they screamed neglect, mirroring the state of our relationship. I let myself in with my key. The air inside was heavy, stale. It smelled of dust and faintly of Sarah's perfume. She was sitting at the kitchen island, nursing a cup of tea. She didn't look up as I walked in. "I'll be quick," I said, my voice echoing in the silence. I walked through the house, each room a punch to the gut. The living room, where we had spent countless evenings curled on the couch, watching movies, talking for hours. The dining room, where we had hosted Thanksgiving dinners, birthdays, and celebrated promotions. Kitchen, where we had cooked together, argued over recipes, and shared hurried breakfasts. Every corner held a memory, a phantom limb of a life that was now separate. In the living room, I noticed a framed photo on the mantelpiece. A picture of us from our wedding day, laughing, our arms around each other, blissfully unaware of the future. I reached for it, my fingers tracing Sarah's smiling face. "No," she said, her voice sharp, finally looking at me. "Leave that." I lowered my hand. It was just a photo, a relic. What did it matter now? I went to the master bedroom, the space that had once been our sanctuary. The bed was unmade, sheets tangled. Her clothes were still in the closet, a splash of color against the empty hangers where my clothes used to be. I opened my dresser drawers. Empty. She had packed my things and put them in boxes in the corner, taped up, labeled John's stuff. It was efficient, brutal. I picked up a box. Inside, my old t-shirts, some books, a few sentimental items, my baseball cap, my worn-out running shoes. My life reduced to a few cardboard boxes. As I worked, slowly, methodically, she stayed in the kitchen, a silent sentinel. Could feel her eyes on me sometimes when I walked past, but I didn't meet her gaze. The silence was thick, heavy with unspoken words, with years of resentment and pain. I found a box of old photos in the back of my closet, tucked away. Pictures from before we met of my family, old friends, my college years, memories from a life that existed before Sarah. It felt strange looking at them now, as if that John was a different person. He had no idea what was coming. I finished packing, carrying the boxes out to my car. It took several trips. Each time I walked past Sarah, I felt the tension in the air, a palpable force. On my last trip, I paused in the hallway looking at the empty walls, the faint marks where our pictures used to hang. It wasn't my home anymore, not really. It was just a house. And I was just the landlord, making sure the tenant cleared out her things. "I am done," I said, my voice hoarse. She finally stood walking towards me, her face unreadable. "Good," she said, her voice devoid of emotion. "Get out." The words, so similar to the ones she spoke that first night, hit differently now. There was no anger, no shock, just a hollow ache. I nodded, picked up the last box, and walked out the door, closing it softly behind me. I sat in my car, looking back at the house. It stood there, solid and unchanging, but everything inside it, everything that mattered, was broken. I had wanted the house back. But what was the point of having the house if there was no home? The empty rooms echoed with the ghosts of laughter and whispered promises, and the silence was more deafening than any scream. This was the heartbreak. Not just the act of eviction, but the slow, painful dissolution of everything I thought was safe. The eviction date loomed closer, a dark cloud on the horizon. Sarah wasn't going quietly, though. Her lawyer, a young, aggressive type, started sending letters. First, a request for mediation. Then a demand for spousal support and a share of the house equity, citing emotional distress and her contributions to the marital home. My lawyer Brenda scoffed at the equity claim. No marriage agreement, no co-ownership on the deed, no significant financial contribution from her side. It's a long shot. They're just trying to scare you. But the mediation request was harder to ignore. "You should go, John," Brenda advised. "It shows you are reasonable, that you are willing to talk. Even if nothing comes of it, it looks good for you if this goes to court." So I agreed. The meeting was set for a Friday afternoon in a neutral conference room at the lawyer's office. Sarah was there with her lawyer, looking pale and drawn. She avoided my gaze, staring fixedly at the table. The mediator, a kind-faced woman with a calm demeanor, started by explaining the process. "This is an opportunity to discuss your disagreements in a respectful environment, with the goal of finding a mutually agreeable solution." Sarah's lawyer spoke first, detailing Sarah's side. She was a victim, thrown out of her home, left with nothing after years of devotion. She presented Sarah as the primary homemaker, who sacrificed her career aspirations to support my own, and therefore deserved compensation and a place to live. It was a distorted picture, but it was effective, painting me as the heartless villain. Then it was my turn. Brenda laid out the facts. The house was mine, bought before the marriage, all expenses paid by me. She countered the homemaker argument by pointing out that Sarah always had her art studio and pursued her own passions, not sacrificing anything for my career. It was all cold, hard facts, devoid of emotion. But then the mediator turned to me. "John, can you tell us, in your own words, what you hope to achieve here today?" I looked at Sarah, then really looked at her. Her eyes were still downcast, but her shoulders were hunched, a posture of defeat. I remembered the vibrant, confident woman I fell in love with, and a wave of sadness washed over me. I don't know what I hope to achieve, I said, my voice raw. She kicked me out of my own home. She told me she didn't want me anymore. I reacted. I reacted badly, maybe. But I reacted. I just want this to be over. I want my life back. And I want the house back, without the constant reminder of what we lost. Sarah finally looked up, her eyes blazing with fresh tears. You want the house back? What about my life, John? What about everything I put into that house? The memories? The years? You are just throwing it all away for a piece of property. You threw it away, Sarah. I shot back, the anger bubbling to the surface. When you told me to get out, you threw it all away. You chose this. I was angry. I was hurt. I didn't mean it like that, she cried, her voice rising. You didn't mean it? I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. You meant it enough to pack my bags, Sarah. You meant it enough to change the locks after I left. I never changed the locks, John, she interjected, a desperate note in her voice. I never did. You left. Doesn't matter now, I said, shaking my head. It's too late. It's over. The mediator intervened, calming us down, redirecting the conversation back to logistics. Sarah's lawyer proposed a settlement, a financial payout, extended time in the house, or even me buying her out of the house. I rejected it all. This wasn't about money for me. It was about principle. It was about the utter destruction of our shared life. I will give her 1 extra week, beyond the 30 days, as a gesture of goodwill, I said, looking at Brenda. But no more, and no payout. The house is mine. I will not be bought out of my own property. The mediation ended in a stalemate. Sarah's lawyer looked furious. Sarah herself looked utterly defeated. As we gathered our things, she walked past me, close enough for me to smell her familiar perfume. Is this really what you want, John? She whispered, her voice cracking. To destroy everything? I looked at her, really looked at her, and for a moment the anger faded, replaced by profound weariness. No, Sarah, I said, my voice barely audible. This is not what I want. But it's what we have now. I walked out of the conference room, leaving her standing there. The silence behind me, heavy with unspoken words, with the ghosts of 1,000 shattered dreams. The attempts at connection, at reconciliation, were futile. We were too far gone. The chasm between us was too wide, too deep, and the eviction date kept inching closer. The final days leading up to the eviction date were agonizing. Every morning I woke up with a knot of dread in my stomach, counting down the hours. The extra week I had offered her felt like an eternity, yet it was also speeding by too fast. I received updates from Brenda. Sarah was still in the house. She hadn't found a new place yet, or at least hadn't communicated it to her lawyer. Her lawyer continued to try and negotiate, sending increasingly desperate proposals. Third, living arrangements, briefly. A longer grace period, even offering to pay me rent for a few months. I rejected them all. The 4 months, I rejected them all. My resolve hardened with each passing day. This had to end. Friends and family were mostly quiet now. The storm of accusations had passed, leaving behind an uncomfortable silence. I imagined them watching from afar, waiting to see how this ugly drama would play out. Some probably hoped I'd back down at the last minute, that I'd show some mercy, but mercy felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. Not when my own heart felt like it had been ripped out. Meichen to my routine. Work. The empty motel room, the quiet dinners alone. I forced myself to focus on my job, on anything but the impending deadline. But every night as I lay in bed, The image of the house filled my mind. My house, her house, our house. The lines blurred, twisted into an unbearable knot of ownership and loss. What would happen on the eviction day? Would she be gone? Would I have to physically remove her? The thought made me sick. I hated this. I hated that it had come to this, but what choice did I have? She had forced my hand. I remembered the day I bought the house, the excitement, the plans. I remembered us painting the walls together, picking out furniture, arguing playfully over throw pillows. Every corner of that house was endued with memories, with our shared life. And now I was tearing it all apart, piece by painful piece. I started to question myself, to waver. Was I really doing the right thing? Was this revenge? Was it cruel? The therapist said it was a necessary boundary, a reclaiming of my space and my life. But it felt so incredibly brutal. To eject the woman I had once loved more than life itself, from the home we had built. One evening, I couldn't take it anymore. I drove to the house, parked down the street, and just watched. The lights were on. I could imagine her inside, sitting alone, just as I was alone. Was she packing? Was she crying? Was she angry? I felt a pang of profound sadness, not just for myself, but for her too. She was losing her home, her sense of security, her anchor, just as I had lost mine. We were two broken people, circling each other, inflicting pain, because we didn't know how to stop. I thought about calling her, about offering one last olive branch, maybe a longer extension, maybe helping her find a place. But then I remembered the humiliation, the sheer brutality of her telling me to get out. Complete disregard for my feelings, for our vows, for everything. The idea of reaching out, only to be rejected again, was too much to bear. My pride, what little I had left, wouldn't allow it. The phone rang. It was Brenda. "John, I have an update. Sarah's lawyer is making a final offer. They're willing to vacate immediately if you agree to cover her moving expenses and a month's rent for a temporary apartment." I closed my eyes. It was a small concession, a tiny olive branch from her side. It wouldn't buy her out of the house, but it would ease her transition. It would show that I wasn't entirely heartless. It was a way to end this without a final, humiliating confrontation. I thought about it for a long moment. The cost was negligible compared to the legal fees and the emotional drain. It would be a gesture, a way to say, "I am not trying to ruin your life, just reclaim mine." "Okay," I said, the word feeling heavy in my mouth. "Tell them I agree. Moving expenses and 1 month's rent for a temporary place. But she needs to be out by the original eviction date. No more extensions." Brenda sounded relieved. "Understood, John. I'll get the paperwork drawn up." As I hung up, a strange mix of relief and emptiness washed over me. It was done. The countdown was almost over. The house would be mine again, legally, finally. But what would I do with it? Live in it alone, surrounded by the ghosts of a broken marriage? Sell it, and erase all traces of our life together? The victory felt hollow, tinged with a deep, aching sadness. The hearth was breaking, and I was holding the hammer. The morning of the eviction date dawned clear and cold. I arrived at the house at precisely 9 a.m., as agreed, with Brenda and a locksmith just in case. My stomach churned with a mixture of anxiety and a strange, quiet anticipation. Her car was gone from the driveway. The porch light was off. A small, neatly stacked pile of boxes sat by the curb, waiting for a bulk trash pickup. My breath hitched. She was gone. I walked up the path, the same path I had walked 1,000 times, and pushed the front door open. It wasn't locked. The house was utterly silent. No music, no voices, no familiar sounds of Sarah moving around. Just the faint smell of lemon cleaner and still the ghost of her perfume. I walked through the living room. Everything was gone. Her vibrant throw pillows, her quirky mugs, her art on the walls. The house was stripped bare, returned to the blank canvas it had been when I first bought it. The empty spaces echoed. I walked into the kitchen. The counter was wiped clean. The fridge was empty. Even the little magnet with our names on it was gone. She had taken everything that was hers and nothing that was mine. There was a single note on the kitchen counter folded neatly. My name, in her familiar handwriting, was on the front. My hands trembled as I picked it up. I opened it. Her elegant looping script filled the page. John, you got what you wanted. The house is yours. I am gone. I know you think I destroyed everything. Maybe I did. Maybe we both did. But I want you to know, I didn't mean to hurt you that night. I was just so lost, so unhappy. I didn't know how to say it without breaking it all. This house was supposed to be our home. And for a while it was. The best years of my life happened here. I loved you in these rooms. I dreamed with you in these rooms. And I died a little in these rooms too. I hope you find what you are looking for in this empty house. I hope it brings you peace, because all it brings me now is pain. I took nothing that wasn't mine. Every memory, every dream I left behind. Maybe you can fill it with new ones. Or maybe, like me, you'll just see ghosts. Goodbye, John. Sarah, I read the letter once, then a second time, then a third. Tears blurred my vision, hot and stinging. Not tears of anger now, but of profound, heart-wrenching sadness. She was right. We had both destroyed it, and we were both left with nothing but pain. The locksmith changed the locks. The click of the bolt sounded final, definitive. The house was mine, secure, legally protected. But it felt colder, emptier than ever before. I walked through every room again, slowly touching the bare walls, the empty shelves. In the master bedroom, the closet was completely empty. No clothes, no shoes, no faint scent of her. She had truly wiped herself clean from this place. I walked out to the backyard, to the small shed that was once her art studio. I pushed open the door. It was empty too. Not a single paint smear, not a stray brush. Just the faint smell of turpentine, a ghost of her passion. The space I had built for her lovingly was now just a dusty shed. I sat on the porch swing, the one we had picked out together. It creaked softly under my weight. The sun was rising higher, casting long shadows across the empty lawn. The house stood before me, magnificent and silent. My house. But it wasn't a home, not anymore. It was just a structure, bricks and mortar filled with echoes and ghosts. I had won the battle, reclaimed my property, asserted my legal rights. But the victory felt like ashes in my mouth. The hearth, the very soul of our home, was broken beyond repair. And standing in its ruins, all I felt was a profound, aching loneliness. The man who owned the house had lost everything that truly mattered. The story wasn't over. But this chapter of my life, the one with Sarah in this house, was truly closed. And I was left alone, in the silence of my victory.